Alfred van Krimpen. Hello, a warm welcome. I'm very excited to have you today because beside that you are the current president of GIPE, the National Real Estate Association, you also here on the Costa del Sol almost 5 decades, if I may say, as a real estate agent and evaluator. So first I would like to talk about that. What brought you to real estate in first?
Well, actually, it just happened. I started off coming into Spain. I was in the merchant navy. I was a ship's engineer, and then when I came to Spain, we thought, well, what can we do? So we started with a bar. But next to the bar, there was a new block going on. I'm now speaking about 1975, so it was a complete different setting, different times then. And the developer, he was only there a few days a week. The rest of the week, no sales office open or anything. And all these people came to have a coffee in my bar and asked about this new development. So I said, well, maybe there's an option there. And then when I found out that most of them were foreigners who were not familiar with the Spanish way of working and the system here, that they were looking to find somebody to help them through the whole process. So that's when I more or less, without ever thinking about it, I came into this business.
And all these years, what excites you most about real estate?
Dealing with people, dealing with all kind of nationalities, all that kind of different cultures. That's, to me, that's the main goal, which keeps it amazing and how should I say, a challenge.
Can you talk about a little bit how was real estate back then?
I remember my very first sale. It was to a German couple, and it was in El Faro, just outside Fuengirola, which was done one of the better located urbanizations. From El Faro towards Marbella, there was almost nothing. There was no construction. And the nice thing was, again, as I mentioned before, that we had these foreign people not knowing the system. So we really had to guide them through everything. But those times, everything was handwritten paperwork, maybe typewriters, and that was it. So we had to do all the window frames ourselves, writing by hand with a picture on paper stuck to it, and contracts, everything was typed by hand. Again, there were completely different times. So for modern, younger people, it may be very hard to understand, but it was really exciting. It was a challenge, as I said before, yeah.
And in the terms of timeline transactions, how did that work? People came with a suitcase of money to buy a property, because I think bank transfer were not really accepted.
Well, there were the both things, actually. There were the people who did money transfers, but that took weeks. And then there were people who walk in with a shopping bag from the supermarket full of cash money. And they said, well, will you go for a coffee? You count the money and then you tell if it's okay.
Wow.
Then we would go to the notary. That was another thing then. At those times, it would take much longer. And for example, the land registry of Fuengirola, they were in Marbella. And to register property, it would take more than a year.
Oh, wow.
So as we knew that it would take so long, what we generally would do is we would save until we had like 2 or 3 or 4 deeds, and then we would drive to Marbella and present them to the land registry. But already the trip from Fuengirola to Marbella was an hour and a quarter at those times. So that was very interesting times to learn how this thing worked. Yeah.
And you mentioned that the notary was even taking longer than right now. How did that work? Because, I mean, we have experience with notaries that you know what time you enter, but you never know what time you leave. How was back then?
It was the same, even though the deeds were much simpler. There were like maximum 10 pages. Mm-hmm. The notary didn't have to check all the documents. We had to bring the main things like land registry, nota simple, the extract, the how you say, the EB, the tax,
the garbage
tax, and the community of owners, and that was basically it. But to prepare the deeds, it was all by typewriter, and copies of copy machines didn't exist then, so it was all very basic.
And in terms of location, because you said, yeah, it took forever to drive from Fuengirola to Marbella. But how did you work in one area without a Google map, without?
Well, I think I was lucky by having been in the merchant navy. My feeling for directions and and addresses was very good. So we were then coping almost the whole coast from Malaga to Algeciras. But again, if you had a client, you would be on the road 3-4 days with them, because to go and visit one property would take more than half a day. And also, we only had the landlines. We didn't have mobile phones. So we had to find a way. And some owners didn't have a telephone. So to make an appointment was more complicated also. We first had to go there and say, so to be with one client, to do a final a sale, well, it could take you like 2 weeks job just to organize everything and to get to the places. Yeah.
And without an MLS system, how did you know about properties? How did you know what is available for sale?
At that moment, we only had the properties we had listed ourselves, and the properties of our colleagues which were, say, like quite close next to us, or maybe we would get somewhere, meet somebody who was an agent, and he would say, I've got this property. Let's keep that in mind, write it down. And that's how it worked then. It was word of mouth mostly.
And in terms of buyers, what were the typical buyer profile back then in the 80s, 70s? Who were buying properties here?
Well, it always varied at those times because the market was not global. So if the Germans were having good times, their economy was doing very well. Maybe the Swedes were doing less. So it was going like waves. Then we would have German buyers, and all of a sudden that would slow down because the economy was a little bit worse. And then we would get Swedes or English people have been there always, actually. They always had this fancy for Spain, and they like to come here.
And in terms of the demand, what has changed? What were the requirements of clients in the 70s, 80s, 90s? What has changed?
I think in the 70s and the 80s, of course, there was not all this knowledge people have nowadays from the internet. So I always say when clients arrive here on the airport nowadays, they know probably more than us because they have been looking to internet for hours and hours and hours to find all the properties. In those days, people would come down, and if you had a lucky strike, where they would come into your office, and then you would show them the properties you had. And they would have a basic demand. They may have said, I need 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, but generally it was more according to their budget. So they would say, well, we got 150,000 German marks. What can we get for that?
What has evolved in the market just beyond the prices? What has evolved in the last 40, 50 years?
Well, I think everything has evolved. And that's good, because if it would have stuck the same all those years, client demand has changed a lot. The market has changed a lot. Quality of the properties has changed a lot. So everything has evolved, the whole market. The only thing I don't like what has evolved is all the rules and regulations we have nowadays, when in our old times it was much more relaxed. And nowadays you have to comply with all kind of rules and regulations. And that makes it a little bit less attractive. But
you have seen several market cycles, ups and downs. What would you say that the highlights were and the down points were?
Well, the highlights are that the properties have improved a lot in quality. There's much more option about locations. Many years ago, the location would be very regulated, very, very narrowed. And I also think what has improved is that nowadays, on one hand, it's not so good, but on the other hand, the buyers arriving on the coast, they already have a better idea what they're looking for, what they want.
And in terms of the decision process, are the current buyers deciding quicker?
In general, I think that the client-wise, it has not changed so much. In the 70s, we would have people who take quick decisions. We would have people who will take a year to take a decision. And with the typical time wasters, when it was a cloudy day, they walk into your office, they wanted to see properties because they could not go to the beach. At the end, you learn how to filter them out and to make sure that they are not coming to spoil your time, to waste your time. Nowadays, actually, you still have this going on. People know more, but you still have people who are indecisive. You have people who take quick decisions, and you have other people. I had, for instance, one couple, and I've been driving them around for 3 days to look at very modern villas, these square blocks in Marbella. And over the days, you learn to know your clients. And at the end, I said, we are wasting our time here. This is not what you really are the type of client for. So on the way back to their hotel, I took them to an 50-year-old house in Malaga, and they bought it in 15 minutes.
That is experience that we read between the lines,
Correct.
that we read signals that clients are not talking about. They might not even be conscious about what they want.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had other cases like that also. So you have people they have something in their mind which is like a dream, and at the end it doesn't really fit with them. So it's us, the professionals, we have to then read them, as you said before, and we have to make them aware that what they are looking for is not realistic. And when you learn them to know them better if you drive around with them, touring with them for a few days. And then at the end you feel, oh, I think I know what you are actually looking for. That's when you're a professional.
Do you have any transaction in your mind in the last in the period of your profession that you say, oh, this I remember this because something has happened, or I remember this?
One special one which I always keep telling is it was end of the 70s. A couple came from Sweden, and it worked out that he was originally Dutch. He was an artist, a painter, a famous painter there. And they were looking for a villa, and he had specific wishes about the lights, because being in Spain, he also wanted to carry on painting. But his wife, she had a handicap. She couldn't walk very well. And to cut a long story short, at the end, I said, well, I have a villa which you may want to see, but it's not really your thing. So it was also in El Faro, actually, and it was like 87 steps.
Wow.
So I took him there, and his wife stayed in the car, and then he walked up the steps, and in the moment he walked in, he said, oh yeah, this is it, because I have windows to the north, windows to the south, windows everywhere. This is what I want. I said, what about your wife? Oh, he said, I will show it to her. He was in his 70s. He came down to the car, he grabbed his wife in his arm, and he walked up the 87 steps, and he said, this is where we are going to live.
Beautiful.
At the end, I was able to negotiate with the Danish neighbors. They had to drive all the way up to the house, and I was able to negotiate with the Danish neighbor that they were allowed to put their car at his parking spot and make a little gate so she would not have to walk all those steps. But that's one of the nice stories I will always remember.
What helped you to stay relevant to the involving market and to the real estate profession during these years?
To stay relevant, I think you should not try to hunt that. As long as you are yourself, you stay yourself. And I found out after 50 years here that most of my clients come from word of mouth. There were a few years that I spent thousands and thousands, more than 20,000 in advertisements and everything, and it didn't bring me really anything. But I can tell you that in the moment, I still have clients who bought a property 30 years ago, 25 years ago. They keep coming back. It's word of mouth. If you have a good service and you listen to your clients, which I think is very important, and you should not have this goal, I want to score, I want to sell them something. They feel you're more relaxed, they become more relaxed, and it's much easier to sell them a property.
What do you see as a current challenge in the real estate market here?
The main challenge for the moment, I think, is that the real estate market should become, as we are fighting for in GIPE, much more professional, regulated. So many of the cowboys will be filtered out, and like happened in Catalonia, the market became much more relaxed, much more serious.
What are the mistakes that you see in new real estate agents currently?
The biggest mistakes with most of them is the hurry that they want to score. They just want to sell and be able to say, oh, I made so much money, I did this and that. If you're, as I said before, if you're more relaxed, actually, I think you will achieve better sales and your clients will come back. If you are just going after the quick goal, then your clients will not stay, loyal to you. And they might look for another agent next time.
What is the most important lesson that the real estate taught you in the years?
But the most important one is listen to your clients, and that will help you through a lot of many mistakes you eventually could make, because many clients walk in for a studio apartment and then other agents, they start driving them around, showing them villas and stuff like that because they want to score. And if you really listen out to your client and you have the patience, then I'm sure that you will be able to become a better agent.
If your daughter would start out today, what would be the advice you would give her?
Mostly do your homework, be serious, and listen, read your clients, which I think is one of the most important things.
In terms of regulation to be a state agent, to be licensed, how it used to be back when you started? Were any organization who were offering?
At those days, there was only the API, the Agente de Propiedad Inmobiliaria, which was registered and regulated by law. Only people with university studies were able to get their license as an API. But funny enough, there was no control if they had any experience in real estate. So veterinaries, dentists, everybody registered as an API and then rented out their titles. That's more or less how we started too. There was a monopoly, and that's actually the basis how GIPE started, that between a group of like 30, 40 people and a few lawyers, we decided that we wanted to break up this monopoly from API. And it took us quite some years. And actually in 1985, we started GIPE. And in 1987, we had nationwide, we had the licenses from the government. We were registered. And since then, we broke the monopoly of API, which I think was very important, because if they would have been all professionals, then there was no way to discuss it. But as it was, just as you had a university title, you could register as API, that didn't feel good. On the other hand, as in 2001, the profession was free all over Europe. Everybody can call himself an estate agent. That also, especially here on the coast, you get a lot of gold diggers and cowboys who just come for the quick money, and then they are off again. After a few years, they are gone. So in that situation, I'm very happy, and I really celebrate that we now have, since December last year, to 2025, we have the new law, the new register obligation for Andalucia too. Years ago, already in 2010, it started in Catalonia, afterwards Valencia and Baleares. And as GIPE, we were able to register all the agents which were member of GIPE. We were able to register them as long as they complied with the regulation and the demands. Yeah.
I know that GIPE is for a long time lobbying at the Junta Andalucia to make real estate as a profession, and I think this is a turning point for our industry, that end of 2025 a new law came out. What do you think, how this is going to shape the market? Will it be really mandatory for real estate agents to be registered, or just something that maybe will fade away? What do you think? What do you expect?
It will really be compulsory and mandatory. And of course, the law has been passed December 2025, and there is a period which the Junta de Andalucía has to set up the regulations, which could go up to a maximum of 2 years. But as far as we know, we have a very good source within the Junta de Andalucía. It probably will be sooner, much sooner than the 2 years. And I think that will help the market. As I said before, it will take a lot of these cowboys away. Market will become more serious, and that's where we have to work towards. Because many years ago, a estate agent was a job which had a good, good respect. And over the years, it has become like similar, to say so to the people, a second-hand car dealer. And that's what we want to get rid of, this,
this image, because currently here in the Costa del Sol, I had a personal experience when I went to an event where my husband was participating, and somebody asked me what I'm doing, and then I said I work in real estate, and then the conclusion that they made, they said, oh, you don't have a job. And I found that really, really interesting perception of how an outsider sees real estate as a profession. If you have nothing to do, if you don't have a job, why don't you become a real estate agent? So I'm grateful for the new law and the implementation.
There's many people who buy a house here, and once they have bought a house, they have this experience, and then they see themselves as a real estate agent. So they advertise in their home countries that they are agents because they have experience. The only experience they have is the property they bought themselves.
The new registration, will it solve all the problem here on the Costa del Sol?
No, I'm sure it will not solve all the problems, but it will solve the biggest problems and most of the problems. Of course, there will always be cowboys. There will always be clients who don't do their homework, so they just look for the cheap deal. And they probably will, as we say, burn their fingers on their deal because they don't work with registered agents. It will not solve all the problems, but it will solve a lot.
The majority. So you are saying it will solve majority of the problems.
If we manage to do that, we should be very happy already, yes.
How this mandatory registration will make things better?
Well, as you know, I always insist very much on consumer protection. And I think with this new registration, consumers will be much more protected as we have to stick much serious, well, they're agents registered with GIPE. They have to stick to our code of ethics. We have the public liability insurance. We have to stick to the rules and the laws. We give them all the tools they need to work seriously and to comply with everything.
Where do you see the future of GIPE in here?
I think GIPE can, will, and have to have a big part in all this, as the Junta Andalucia also requires that you should be registered in an association or somewhere. On the other hand, the GIPE is, for the moment, we are working very hard on it. You probably know best that we will give all our members all the tools and all the help they need to become serious professionals. We work very hard on our code of ethics. We do courses, we do events. So it's very important to become a member of GIPE, if only it is because of all the tools we will give our members.
Yeah, and to participate, to establish the industry standards, because GIPE is famous to have industry standards and very strict code of ethics. Together with Christopher Fogelberg, you wrote an article about 3 different markets. How is that? How do you see that? Can you say something more about it?
Yeah, that's, to me, is a very passionate item, because I've been discussing that in meetings with directors of central banks in Madrid, that in my opinion, everybody makes huge mistakes. They always, if you see the statistics on the real estate market from Idealista or whatever, from the Bank of Spain, they all put everything in one basket, but actually Spain is 3 markets. It's not just one market. We have the residential market where Spanish people try to find a property. They need financing and stuff like that. That market is very much in demand and the prices are going crazy, but there's no product. Then there's the inland market, which is a market which has been there forever, but the prices are not increasing that much, like maybe last year, maybe just 2%. And then we have the coastal areas where mainly tourists buy or Spaniards buy as a second home, which is totally different market. All the markets in their needs, in their pricing, and in their the time they take to sell. So I always say you cannot throw all this together in one basket and then say, oh, the average is so and so much. You should really distinguish between these 3 markets. And in my opinion, I always discuss that with many people. I do valuations, and then they want an average of the market. I said, well, you cannot do that. You have to distinguish. Spain is 3 markets, in my opinion, and I keep defending that. And when you discuss it with like central bank directors in Madrid, they say, yeah, you're right. But at the end, nobody does anything about it. It just always stays the same. So that to me is a very interesting thing. That's why we wrote this article about it. Yeah.
Very passionate. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.